The last normal thing I remember is arguing about pizza. Hawaiian versus pepperoni. My girlfriend Jess was on the couch in my apartment, feet tucked under her, scrolling her phone with one hand and gesturing at me with the other. Pineapple is a fruit, Marcus. Fruit doesn't go on pizza. My brother Eli was sitting at the kitchen counter, not eating, not talking, just watching his phone with that look he'd been wearing for weeks, tight jaw, eyes scanning like he was reading something that physically hurt. It was a Friday in October. I was 26, 3 years into a graphic design job I didn't hate. Living in a second-floor apartment in Richmond, Virginia, 40 minutes from the house where Eli and I grew up. Normal life. Ordinary Friday. The kind of night you don't archive in memory because nothing about it seems worth keeping. Eli was 31, 5 years older, which had always felt like 10. He'd been the one to raise me after Mom checked out emotionally when Dad left. Not in a dramatic way, she still fed us, still drove us to school, but Eli was the one who sat with me during thunderstorms, who taught me to ride a bike, who showed up to my middle school art shows when she forgot. He'd done 2 tours in Afghanistan, come back quieter, gotten a job in logistics for a shipping company, and lived alone in a house outside Mechanicsville that he'd bought with VA loan money. We saw each other every couple of weeks. He was steady, reliable, a little distant since he'd come back, but that was Eli. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was that for 3 years, Eli had been building something underneath that house. "You're not eating," I said to him that night. He'd arrived unannounced around 7, which wasn't unusual, but he'd brought a duffel bag, which was. It sat by the door like it was waiting for something. "Not hungry?" He didn't look up from his phone. "You drove 40 minutes to watch me and Jess argue about pizza toppings." He locked his phone, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "I need you to pack a bag tonight." Jess glanced up. I laughed because that seemed like the appropriate response to a non sequitur that strange. "Pack a bag for what?" "Clothes for a week, medications, anything you can't replace." His voice was flat, not urgent, not panicked, flat in the way that scared me more than yelling would have. Controlled. "Both of you, I need you to do this in the next 30 minutes, and I need you to not ask questions until we're in the car." Jess sat up straight. "Eli, what's going on?" 30 minutes, he said. "I'll explain everything, but not here, and not now." I stared at him. He stared back. And here's what I need you to understand about my brother. Eli had never asked me for anything, not once in my entire life. He'd given me rides, money, advice, silence when I needed it. He'd never once said, "I need you to do something for me." The fact that he was saying it now, in that voice, with that bag by the door, it cracked something open in my chest. "Eli, you're scaring me." "Good," he said. "You should be scared. Pack." We packed. Jess kept asking me what was happening, and I kept saying I didn't know, which was true, and which made her angrier than if I'd been lying. She threw clothes into a backpack, jeans, sweaters, her inhaler, a phone charger. I grabbed my laptop, a change of clothes, my wallet, the fireproof lockbox with our passports and birth certificates that I kept in the closet. I don't know why I grabbed the lockbox. Something about Eli's voice made me think in terms of permanence. In the car, Eli's truck, a black F-150 with a camper shell, he drove without speaking for the first 10 minutes. Jess was in the back seat. I was riding shotgun, watching the streetlights thin as we moved away from the city. It was 8:47 p.m. "Eli." "There's a respiratory virus," he said, eyes on the road. "First cases appeared in Guangzhou 6 weeks ago. It spread to Seoul, then Mumbai, then Lagos. CDC flagged it internally 3 weeks ago. WHO hasn't gone public because the mortality data was inconsistent. Some patients recovered, some died, some... He stopped, his hands adjusted on the wheel. Some what? Reanimated. The word hung in the cab like smoke. Jess leaned forward between the seats. Reanimated, she repeated. Like exactly what you think. I'm not going to dress it up. Dead tissue reactivating. Motor function without cognition. Aggressive. Contagious through fluid transfer. He took a breath. Initial cases in the U.S. were identified in Seattle 9 days ago. They contained them. They thought. But there are clusters now in Atlanta, Chicago, Houston. The incubation period is 8 to 12 hours. Symptoms present as severe flu, then respiratory failure, then death, then... How do you know this? My voice came out thin. I didn't recognize it. I have a contact at USAMRIID. Someone I served with who went into biodefense research. He's been feeding me updates since week 2. Eli's jaw tightened. The public announcement is coming. They're going to frame it as a quarantine protocol. But the containment window closed 4 days ago. There are thousands of infected people moving through airports right now who don't know they're carrying it. Eli, this sounds... Jess started. Insane. I know how it sounds. He glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting her eyes. I need you to trust me for 8 hours. If I'm wrong, you can call me crazy for the rest of my life. I'll deserve it. But if I'm right, and you weren't somewhere safe? His voice cracked. Just barely. Just at the edge. I can't have that. I looked out the window. The highway was normal. Friday night traffic, taillights, a gas station glowing in the distance. Nothing about the world looked sick. Nothing looked ending. Where are we going? I asked. Home, he said. My house. And what's at your house? He didn't answer for a long time. Then, something I built. Eli's house sat on 3 acres outside Mechanicsville, backed up against a tree line that ran for miles. A 1-story ranch, nothing special, beige siding, metal roof, a detached garage he'd always kept locked. I'd been there a dozen times and never thought twice about the garage. He said it was storage. I never questioned it. We pulled in around 9:30. There was another car in the driveway, a silver Honda Civic I recognized as belonging to our mother, Linda. She was standing on the porch in a coat, arms crossed, looking smaller than I remembered. Beside her was Eli's ex-girlfriend, Nadia, a quiet woman with dark hair who dated him for 2 years before they'd split, amicably, about 8 months prior. I hadn't seen her since the breakup. Mom, I said as I got out. What are you doing here? She looked at Eli. Her face was complicated, afraid, but also something else. Something that looked like resignation. Like she'd already decided to go along with this. He called me this afternoon, she said. Told me to come. Nadia was holding a backpack and a canvas tote. She met my eyes and shrugged a small, helpless gesture. He called me too. 5 people. Eli had gathered 5 people to his house on a Friday night and told us nothing except to trust him. I watched him walk to the detached garage, punch a code into a keypad I'd never noticed before, and pull the rolling door up. Inside wasn't a garage. Or rather, there were shelves, tools, a workbench, but in the center of the concrete floor was a steel hatch, 3 feet square, with a recessed handle and a second keypad. Eli crouched, entered a code, and pulled the hatch open. Below it, a steel staircase descended into LED-lit concrete. Nobody moved. 3 years, Eli said quietly, looking down into the opening. Every weekend. Most of my savings. I dug this myself, poured the concrete myself, ran the ventilation and electrical myself. It's 1,200 square feet. It has air filtration, water purification, stored food for 6 people for 4 months, a composting toilet, sleeping quarters, a medical station. He looked up at us, at me. I know what you're thinking. You're out of your mind, I said. Maybe. He stood. But you're going down there tonight. And tomorrow, when the emergency alert system activates, you're going to be glad you did. My mother was already moving toward the stairs. That told me something she'd known. Maybe not the details, but she'd known something. Eli had told her something he hadn't told me, and she'd believed him enough to show up tonight without argument. Jess gripped my hand. Her palm was sweating. Marcus, she whispered. This is... I know. We could just go home. I looked at my brother. He was watching me the way he used to when I was 8, and afraid of the dark patient, certain, waiting for me to decide to trust him. And I hated it. I hated that he'd done this without asking, that he'd built a survival bunker in secret and decided for all of us that we'd need it. That he'd looked at the world and seen an ending while the rest of us were arguing about pizza. I hated it. But I took the stairs. The bunker was smaller than the numbers suggested. 1,200 square feet sounds reasonable until you put 5 adults in it, with their baggage literal and otherwise. The main space was divided into zones. A central living area with a fold-out table and bench seating. A narrow kitchen strip with a propane stove, sealed water containers, and shelving packed with canned goods, freeze-dried meals, and medical supplies. 2 sleeping alcoves separated by curtains each with a double bunk and a single. A bathroom no bigger than a closet. And in the back, behind a locked door, what Eli called the operations room radio equipment. A laptop connected to an external antenna array. A printed binder full of protocols. The air smelled like concrete and recycled nothing. The lights hummed. The walls felt closer than they were. So we just stay here? Nadia asked. She was standing in the center of the room like she was afraid to touch anything. For how long? Until the surface is manageable, Eli said. He was already at the radio equipment, adjusting frequencies. The initial outbreak phase, based on the models I've been tracking, will peak within 72 hours of public awareness. After that, models, I repeated. You've been modeling this. He looked at me. Yes. For how long? 2 years. The silence that followed was a living thing. My mother sat down at the table and put her hands flat on the surface, steadying herself. Jess stood beside me, not touching me, not speaking. I could feel her vibrating with the effort of not screaming. You've known about this for 2 years, I said slowly. And you didn't tell me. I didn't know this specific pathogen existed 2 years ago. I knew something like it was statistically probable. The research was clear, novel pathogens, gain-of-function proximity, infrastructure vulnerabilities. I'm not talking about epidemiology, Eli. I'm talking about the fact that you spent 3 years digging a hole in the ground and filling it with canned beans, and you didn't once think to mention it to your brother. His expression didn't change. If I'd told you, would you have helped? That's not the point. Would you have believed me? I wanted to say yes. The word was right there. But we both knew it would have been a lie. If Eli had called me 2 years ago and said I'm building a bunker because I think the dead will walk, I would have told him to see a therapist. I would have called Mom. I would have worried about him quietly and done nothing. Exactly, he said. He turned back to the radio. Jess pulled me into the far sleeping alcove. The curtain gave us the illusion of privacy in a space where privacy didn't exist. "Marcus, I'm not okay with this," she said, voice low. "This is not normal behavior. Building a secret bunker, not telling anyone, then hurting people underground in the middle of the night. I know. What if he's wrong? What if he's having some kind of episode? PTSD can cause... I know. So why are we staying? Because he's my brother. Because he's never been wrong about anything that mattered. Because the look on his face when he said I can't have that broke something in me that I don't know how to fix." 8 hours, I said. He said if he's wrong, we go home. She looked at me like she was measuring something. Then she nodded, once, and sat down on the lower bunk with her arms wrapped around herself. Sleep didn't happen. Not for any of us. My mother made tea on the propane stove, a ritual so ingrained that it functioned independent of context. She could be underground, in a concrete box built by her paranoid firstborn, and she'd still make tea. There was something comforting about that. Something infuriating about it, too. Nadia sat at the table and read from a novel she'd brought, or pretended to. She turned pages at regular intervals, but her eyes didn't track. At one point, she looked up and caught me watching. "He called me at work," she said. "Told me to leave immediately. Didn't explain. Just said if I still trusted him, I'd go. And you went." Eli doesn't exaggerate. In 2 years together, I never once heard him say something he didn't mean. She looked at the closed operations room door. "He still loves me. That's why I'm here and not someone else." I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. At 11 p.m., Eli emerged from the operations room. His face was different, grayer, older. He sat at the table and accepted the tea my mother pushed toward him. "First domestic E. AS alert is scheduled for 6 a.m. Eastern," he said. "CDC and FEMA joint announcement. They're calling it a severe respiratory pathogen with unusual neurological reactivation properties. They're not going to use the word zombie. They're going to say post-mortem ambulatory reflex. They're going to recommend shelter in place." "How do you know the exact time?" Jess asked from the alcove entrance. Her voice was sharp. "Because my contact is part of the communications team drafting the language." Eli sipped his tea. "By the time the announcement goes out, the infection rate in major metropolitan areas will be past containable. They know this. The announcement isn't about containment, it's about legal liability. They need the paper trail that says they warned people." "This is really happening," my mother said. Not a question, a recalibration. "Yes." She nodded. Then she stood, rinsed her mug in the tiny sink, and walked to the sleeping alcove without another word. I heard the creak of the bunk, the small sound of her breathing changing as she tried, impossibly, to sleep. I sat across from Eli, just the two of us, with Nadia reading her unread book at the far end. "Who else knows?" I asked. "Knows what?" "That you built this, that you were preparing." He looked at me. "Nobody. Mom suspected something. She found receipts for concrete last year, asked questions I deflected. But nobody knows the details. Nobody's been down here except me, until tonight." "And the people you didn't call? Your friends? Co-workers?" His face did something then, a micro-expression that flashed and vanished. Pain, maybe. Or the scar tissue over something that used to be pain. I had to choose. The space supports 6. I calculated food supply, air capacity, water recycling efficiency. 6 people, 4 months. That's the math. You chose 5. I chose 5. The 6th slot is margin for error. He set down his tea. I didn't make these choices lightly, Marcus. I spent months. He stopped himself, shook his head. You don't want to know that. Know what? How long I agonized over who to include, what the criteria were, how I weighed. He stopped again. It doesn't matter. You're here. That's what matters. But I saw his eyes drift, just for a second, to a spot on the wall where nothing was. And I knew he was thinking about people who weren't here. People he'd decided didn't make the cut. And I wanted to ask who and why and how you live with that kind of math. But the radio crackled. A burst of static, then a voice garbled, half swallowed by interference, and Eli was already on his feet, already moving toward the operations room. The voice said something I couldn't parse. Eli could. His face confirmed it. At 2:17 a.m., Eli let us listen to the radio. Not the emergency broadcasts, those hadn't started yet. The amateur frequencies, ham radio operators, truckers on CB bands, police scanners he'd patched into the system. A trucker outside Charlotte reported a pileup on I-85 that wasn't a normal pileup. People getting out of their cars, he said, his voice thick with confusion. And there they ain't right. They're walking toward other cars. The transmission cut. A ham operator in suburban Atlanta described his neighbor standing in the yard at 1 a.m., motionless, then suddenly moving toward a dog that was barking at him. The operator went quiet after that. A police scanner in Norfolk, just 40 minutes from us, carried fragments. Reports of assaults, multiple victims with bite wounds, hospitals requesting backup for patient overflow, requesting clarification on use of force protocol for repeat. Subjects do not respond to verbal commands. Jess was standing behind me, her hand on my shoulder, grip tightening with each transmission. Nadia had closed her book. My mother hadn't come out, but I could see the curtain of her alcove was pulled back an inch. She was listening. It's starting faster than projected, Eli said. He was writing in a notebook, times, locations, transmission content. A log. The southeastern corridor is first. Population density plus travel patterns. Richmond will see infected within... He checked his watch. 4 to 6 hours. Richmond. My apartment, my neighbors. The coffee shop on the corner where I worked on freelance projects. The gym where Jess took Thursday evening classes. The grocery store, the park, the street I walked every day. My parents, Jess said suddenly. Marcus, my parents are in Hampton. I looked at Eli. He was already shaking his head, not in refusal, but in the kind of grief that comes preloaded. He'd already calculated this. He'd already accounted for the people we'd want to save and the impossibility of saving them. I have their number, Jess said. Her voice was climbing. I can call them. I can tell them to drive here. If you call them, Eli said carefully. And they believe you. And they leave immediately. And traffic hasn't already collapsed. They might make it. But the bunker supports 6. They would make 7. So what? We just leave them? I'm not making that decision for you. I'm telling you the mathematics. Mathematics, that word. The way he said it, like he'd been doing this calculus for years, weighing lives against cubic feet of air, days of food against bodies that consumed it. This was how my brother thought now. This was who he'd become while I was designing logos and arguing about pizza. He'd turned himself into someone who could say the mathematics while a woman begged about her parents. Call them, I said to Jess. Tell them to drive to Eli's, now. Eli looked at me. Not anger, something sadder. Marcus? She's not leaving her parents to die because your spreadsheet says 6. If we exceed capacity, then we figure it out. That's what people do, Eli. They figure it out. He held my gaze for a long time. Then he nodded once and handed Jess a phone, a burner, unregistered, from a drawer I hadn't seen him open. She dialed. It rang, and rang, and rang. No answer. She tried again. Same result. Again. The voicemail greeting her father's voice, warm and unhurried, played 3 times before she lowered the phone and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. An expression I hope I never see again. I held her. There was nothing else to do. The emergency alert hit at 5:48 a.m., 12 minutes early. Eli's phone buzzed first, then Jess's, then mine, all in rapid succession. The tone, that droning, saw-toothed sound designed to bypass your rational brain and grab the animal underneath, filled the bunker like something physical. Severe public health emergency. Shelter in place immediately. Do not travel. Do not approach individuals exhibiting unusual behavior. Await further instructions from local authorities. No mention of the dead walking. No mention of reanimation. Just unusual behavior, like they were describing a bad reaction to medication. That's it, Nadia said. That's all they're saying? Eli was at the radio, scanning frequencies. They'll escalate the language in 2 to 3 hours, when the footage becomes undeniable. Right now, they're managing panic trajectory. If they say the word, if anyone official says zombie or undead or reanimation, the response collapses. People won't shelter. They'll run, and running spreads it. He was right. I hated that he was right, because being right meant this was real. And real meant everything above us was ending. My mother came out of the sleeping alcove fully dressed, hair pinned back, face composed. She walked to the kitchen area and began making breakfast oatmeal from the sealed containers, instant coffee from a vacuum jar. The normalcy of it was so grotesque that I almost laughed. "Mom, are you?" "We have to eat," she said. "Whatever is happening, we have to eat." She was right too. Everyone was right. Everyone except me, who had done nothing, prepared nothing, believed nothing, until it was too late to matter. Jess hadn't slept. She was sitting on the bunk with my phone, hers had died, and I'd given her mine, trying her parents every 15 minutes. No answer. She'd moved through panic into a flat, mechanical repetition that frightened me more than the screaming would have. At 6:30, Eli pulled up a news stream on the laptop. The video was shaky. Civilians shot a street somewhere that the Chiron identified as Atlanta. People running. Behind them, figures that moved wrong, too fast and too aimless at the same time, lurching with a momentum that had nothing to do with intention. One of them caught a man by the arm. The camera jerked away. "Turn it off," my mother said from the stove. Her back was to the screen. She didn't need to see it. Eli didn't turn it off. He watched it the way a surgeon watches a scan, clinical, tracking, cataloging. I watched him watching it, and I thought, he's confirming data. He's checking his projections against reality. This was validation for him. 3 years of labor and obsession and isolation and secrecy. And here it was proof. He wasn't celebrating. But there was something in his posture, some slight settling, some release of tension that I recognized as the relief of being believed. And that relief made me furious. "You're glad," I said. His head snapped toward me. "What?" "Not glad it's happening, but glad you were right. Glad we're down here. Glad you can say I told you so." I would never. You don't have to say it. It's in your spine. You've been carrying yourself differently since the alert went off. You've been... I struggled for the word. You've been relaxing. He stood up slowly, closed the laptop, looked at me with eyes that were steady in a way that made me feel unsteady. You're angry, he said. That's fine. Be angry. I took away your choice. I showed up and told you what to do and didn't give you the option of informed consent. That's a violation. I know that. Then why? Because you're alive. And in 8 hours, when the infection saturates the eastern seaboard, you're going to still be alive. And being alive and angry at me is better than being dead with your autonomy intact. He walked past me toward the operations room. I'll take that trade every time. The first day underground was the longest day of my life. Not because of danger we were sealed, filtered, invisible. Because of the waiting. Because of the nothing. Eli had the radio. He had the laptop. He had information. The rest of us had walls. Nadia tried to organize. She sorted food supplies, inventoried medical kit contents, wrote neat lists on paper she'd found in the operations room. She was a project manager by profession, and this was how she coped, by making the incomprehensible into line items. My mother cleaned surfaces that were already clean, made meals from containers, washed dishes by hand in the small sink. The domestic rhythm of it was her armor. If she could keep the routine of life, then life was still happening, even down here. Jess sat. She answered questions in monosyllables. She tried her parents every 30 minutes, then every hour, when I gently told her the phone battery needed to last. She never asked me to comfort her, and I didn't know how to offer what she didn't ask for. I did nothing. I sat at the table and did nothing, and felt the full weight of my uselessness. Eli had built this. Eli had planned this. Eli had saved us. What had I done? Graphic design, ordered pizza, existed as the younger brother who needed saving. At noon, Eli gave us an update. Richmond was reporting widespread incidents. The National Guard had been deployed to 3 cities. Hospitals were no longer admitting patients. The president had addressed the nation. Eli played the recording and used the phrase, unprecedented neurological pathogen. Still not the word, never the word. It's moving faster than the models predicted, Eli said. His voice had a new tightness. The incubation period is shorter in some cases, 6 hours instead of 8 to 12. That means the doubling rate. He caught himself. We didn't need the math. We needed the conclusion. How long until it reaches here? I asked. It's already here. Rural spread is slower because of population density. But Mechanicsville is 20 minutes from Richmond. Infected individuals will migrate outward as resources thin in the city. I'd estimate we'll have surface presence within 24 hours. Surface presence, like they were weather, like the dead walking was a front moving in from the west. At 3 p.m., Jess's parents answered. Her mother's voice came through the speaker, tinny and thin. Jessica? Jessica, oh, thank God. We've been trying to call, but the networks. Jess grabbed the phone with both hands. Mom, where are you? We're home. We're locked inside. Your father boarded the windows. There are Jessica. There are people in the street, and they're not. Her voice broke. They're not people anymore. Mom, listen. You need to get in the car. You need to drive to... We can't. The street is there everywhere. Your father tried to move the car, and one of them, it came at the window. He barely... Mom, we're okay. We're locked in. We're on the 2nd floor. We have food for... The line cut. Not a dropped call, a severed connection. The network collapsing, overloaded, crumbling under the weight of a million desperate calls, just like this one. Jess looked at me, and I saw it happen the moment where hope didn't die, but transformed into something harder. Something that would calcify over the days ahead into a shape I wouldn't recognize until it was too late. "They're alive," I said. "They're locked in. They're smart. They'll make it." She nodded. She didn't believe me. I didn't believe me either. On the second day, we heard the first sounds from above. Not through the hatch that was sealed, insulated, buried under the garage floor above, but through the ventilation system, which drew air from a concealed intake pipe 20 feet from the house. The pipe was filtered, screened, hidden in what looked like a garden drainage setup. But it transmitted sound, footsteps, not purposeful, not rhythmic. The shuffling, stopping, shuffling pattern of something that moved without destination. Something that was just out there, existing in the space where we used to exist. My mother looked at the ceiling. It's outside," Eli said quickly. "It can't get in. It doesn't know we're here. The intake is silent. There's no exhaust odor. It has no reason to stop." The shuffling continued for 20 minutes. Then nothing. Then, hours later, more. Different rhythm. More than one set of feet. Nadia counted under her breath. 2, maybe 3 sets of movement. "They're gathering," Eli said. He was making notes again, always making notes. Not intentionally, there's no pack behavior in the early literature. But they drift toward stimuli. If one stops near the house, others may follow the sound of its movement. "Great," I said. "So your bunker is becoming a magnet." "The bunker is invisible. The house isn't. Eventually, I expect them to enter the house. The doors won't hold indefinitely. But the hatch is under the garage floor. Under 2 inches of poured concrete and a steel plate rated for 2,000 pounds of distributed weight." Jess hadn't moved from the bunk in hours. She was curled on her side, facing the wall. I'd brought her water, food. She ate mechanically. She thanked me without looking at me. That night, though, we measured night only by the clock, not by any change in the unchanging fluorescent light. I confronted Eli in the operations room. He'd been in there for hours, monitoring, logging, building a picture of the collapse that I wasn't allowed to see. "I want to know something," I said. "Okay." "The 6th slot, the margin for error. Was that always going to be empty?" He didn't answer immediately. He was sitting in front of the radio, headphones around his neck, the glow of the laptop casting his face in blue. He looked older than 31. He looked like someone who'd been carrying something for so long that it had worn grooves in him. "There was a version of this," he said slowly, "where I included David. David, our cousin. 33, lived in Fredericksburg, 2 kids, wife who'd left him last year. David, who taught high school history and coached junior varsity basketball, and called me on my birthday every year without fail. Why didn't you? Fredericksburg is 45 minutes south in good traffic. If I'd included him, I would have needed to alert him earlier, much earlier, to give him time to reach the house. Every hour of earlier warning increased the risk that he'd tell someone, that word would spread, that I'd lose control of the timeline. You chose operational security over David. I chose 5 guaranteed lives over a 6th uncertain one. David has a truck. David is resourceful. David may be fine. Or David may be dead because you didn't call him." Eli's jaw worked. A muscle in his cheek twitched. "Yes," he said. "That's possible." "How do you live with that?" He looked at me, not defensive, not guilty, just factual in the way that was becoming his default? I don't know yet. I'll let you know when I find out. Day 4. The sounds above had become irregular but persistent. Something had entered the house. We heard it at 3 a.m., a crash that could only have been the back door giving way. Then the heavy, purposeless movement of a body navigating furniture it didn't remember owning. Eli didn't seem surprised. He'd built the hatch with this inevitability in mind. The thing above could stand on the garage floor directly over us and never know we existed. But knowing that intellectually, and hearing it, hearing the drag of feet 12 feet above your head, separated by concrete and steel but nothing else, those are different things. My mother stopped going near the garage-facing wall. Nadia slept with her pillow over her ears. Jess, increasingly, didn't sleep at all. On day 4, Eli made an announcement. I need to go topside. Everyone stopped what they were doing. The silence was absolute, except for the hum of the ventilation fan. The solar array on the roof needs manual reorientation, he said. I designed the system with a 3-day battery backup, and we've drawn heavily on lighting and ventilation. If I don't adjust the panels, we lose electrical within 48 hours. Can't we conserve? Nadia asked. We're already conserving. The filtration system runs on electrical. Without it, we have passive ventilation only, which means we're breathing whatever's in the ambient air, including potential aerosolized pathogen. I'll go with you, I said. The words came out before I decided to say them. Eli shook his head. You're not trained. You don't know the panel system, and the house has at least one infected occupant. I'll need to clear it first. Clear it how? He opened a cabinet I hadn't noticed before, recessed into the wall, flush with the concrete. Inside, a handgun, a suppressed barrel attachment, 2 spare magazines, and a crowbar, the head wrapped in duct tape. My mother made a sound, small, involuntary. I go alone, Eli said. I go quiet. I clear the house, reorient the panels, check the perimeter, and return. 15 minutes maximum. And if you don't come back? I asked. The question felt like dropping a glass I knew it would shatter. I said it anyway. If I'm not back in 30 minutes, you seal the hatch permanently using the interior bolt. There are instructions in the protocol binder, page 14, for long-term habitation without surface access. The food and water will last 4 months. By then, either rescue infrastructure will exist, or it won't, and you'll need to surface regardless. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He looked at each of us in turn. Mom, Nadia, Jess, me. I'll be back. He wasn't asking permission. He was informing us. The way he informed us of everything after the decision was made, never before. This was who he was. This was who he'd always been, maybe. And I just never noticed, because the stakes were never high enough to make his control visible. He went up at 6 a.m., when the sounds above had been quiet for 2 hours. I watched him climb the steel stairs, pushed the hatch open with one arm, the other held the suppressed handgun, and disappear into the gray morning light that fell through like something from another world. I stood at the bottom of the stairs, listening. Silence for 3 minutes. Then a single sound, a dull, wet impact. The crowbar. Then nothing. Then footsteps, purposeful, human. Eli's moving through the house above. I tracked them by sound. Kitchen, hallway, living room. Then overhead, then fading, then gone. The roof, the panels. 12 minutes later, he descended. Blood on the crowbar. None on him. His face was the same controlled mask, but his hands, when he set the crowbar down, his hands shook for about 3 seconds before he stilled them. Done, he said. Panels reoriented. 1 infected in the house neutralized. 3 visible in the yard, but they didn't react to my movement. He paused. They're slower than the videos suggest, almost dormant in low-stimulus environments. How did it look? Nadia asked. Outside. Eli was quiet for a moment. There's smoke on the Richmond horizon. The neighbor's house, the Petersons, their door is open. No sign of them. There are cars on Route 360 that aren't moving. He sealed the hatch, locked it, turned around. It's worse than the models predicted. After Eli went topside, something shifted between us. Not immediately, it happened in increments over the next 2 days, the way a crack in a foundation spreads. Invisible at first, then suddenly structural. Nadia was the first to articulate it. Day 6, while Eli was in the operations room, and the rest of us were in the common area. She said quietly, not looking at anyone in particular, "Has anyone else noticed that we don't make any decisions?" My mother looked up from the beans she was portioning. Jess, who had been slightly more present since the call with her mother, the confirmation of life, however tenuous, had given her something to hold, sat forward. Eli decides when we eat, because he controls the rationing schedule, Nadia continued. Eli decides when we sleep, because he controls the lights. Eli decides what we know, because he controls the radio and the laptop. Eli decides when the hatch opens, because he controls the codes. He built this place, my mother said, but her voice was careful, measured, like she was testing the words even as she said them. I know he built it. I'm grateful to be alive. Those 2 things can both be true at the same time as this. We are entirely dependent on one person who makes every decision unilaterally and presents them to us as facts. I felt something inside me click into place, the way a key turns, and you realize the door was locked the whole time. She was right. I'd been feeling it for days, without knowing how to name it. He saved our lives, I said. Because someone had to say it. Because it was true. He decided which lives to save, Nadia replied. That's different. Is it? Yes. Saving implies response to an emergency. Eli didn't respond, he pre-selected. He chose who would survive and who wouldn't, years in advance, without consent, without discussion, without input. She looked at me directly. When did you feel like you had a choice? Any choice? At any point in this entire process? I opened my mouth, closed it. She was right. From the moment Eli appeared at my apartment with his duffel bag, I hadn't made a single meaningful decision. Pack a bag, his directive. Get in the car, his timeline. Go underground, his infrastructure. Stay, his rationale. Even challenging him about Jess's parents had resulted not in my decision prevailing, but in his permission being granted. He'd allowed us to call them, as if our autonomy required his approval. I love your brother, Nadia said. Her voice was soft now, private. I loved him for 2 years, and part of why I left was this thing he does, where love and control become the same action, where keeping you safe and keeping you contained become indistinguishable. My mother set down the spoon she was holding. Her face was doing something complicated, guilt and recognition and resistance all at once. He's always been like this, she said. The admission seemed to cost her something. Since he was a boy, since your father left and he decided he was responsible for everyone. He doesn't know how to love without directing, without managing. I thought about growing up with Eli. The way he'd decided what I wore to school when I was too young to choose. The way he'd chosen my electives for me in high school. The way he'd helped me pick a college, steered me toward it. Really, framing it as my choice while eliminating options he didn't approve of. Small things, invisible at the time, but a pattern, a lifelong pattern of benevolent control so thorough I'd never noticed I was inside it. And now, here we were, underground, in a box he'd built to exact specifications, dependent on systems only he understood, alive because of him, and trapped because of him. And those two things were the same thing. "So what do we do?" Jess asked. Nobody had an answer. On day 8, I asked Eli to teach me the systems. He was in the operations room, headphones on, logging transmissions. I stood in the doorway until he noticed me. He pulled one ear free. "I want to learn," I said. "The radio, the water system, the filtration, the solar panels, the hatch codes, all of it." He studied me. I couldn't read what was behind his eyes. Suspicion? Hurt? Relief? Maybe all three. "Why?" "Because if something happens to you, we're dead. And because," I chose my words carefully, "because this isn't sustainable. One person holding everything. It's not good for us, and it's not good for you." He was quiet for a long time. The radio crackled in the background. Someone on a ham frequency reading out a list of safe zones that probably weren't safe anymore. "You're angry with me," he said. "I've been angry with you for 8 days. Because I didn't tell you. Because you never tell me. Because you decided I was someone to be saved, not someone to plan with. Because even now, even after I proved I'd follow you underground on nothing but trust, you still treat me like I'm 8 years old and afraid of thunderstorms." He flinched, actually flinched. I'd never seen Eli flinch from anything. "I didn't..." He stopped, rubbed his face with both hands. When he lowered them, he looked human in a way he hadn't since we'd arrived. Cracked, uncertain. "I didn't know how else to do this, Marcus. I didn't know how to tell you the world was ending without sounding insane. I didn't know how to include you in 3 years of planning without explaining why I was planning. And I couldn't explain why without showing you evidence that would have haunted you, evidence I wish I'd never seen. You chose to protect me from knowledge. Yes. That's not your choice to make. I know." His voice was raw now, thin. "I know that. I've known it the entire time. But knowing something is wrong and being able to stop yourself from doing it." He gestured at the bunker around us. "I built this for you. I built it because when I think about you dead, when I imagine a world where I survived and you didn't..." He stopped, swallowed. "I would rather you hate me alive than love me dead." The words landed like a physical weight. I sat down across from him in the small chair crammed against the wall. "I don't hate you," I said. "Not yet. Teach me the systems, Eli." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached behind him and pulled out the protocol binder, thick, tabbed, obsessively organized. He set it between us and opened to the first page. "Water first," he said. "It's the most critical single point of failure system." I leaned in, and for the first time in 8 days, I felt like something other than cargo. Day 14, 2 weeks underground. I knew the water system, the electrical system, the filtration protocols, and half the radio frequencies by heart. I knew the hatch codes. Eli had given them to me on day 10, written on a piece of paper, folded twice, pressed into my hand without ceremony. "In case," he said. Nothing else. The world above had settled into a new pattern. The radio chatter had thinned to fewer voices each day, those remaining more clipped, more exhausted, more geographic. Regional networks forming. Someone calling themselves Blue Ridge Actual was broadcasting structured survival information on a loop: water purification methods, fortification principles, headshot protocols. The word zombie was everywhere now. The euphemisms had collapsed under the weight of reality. We'd heard nothing from Jess's parents since that single call. The Hampton area was listed by surviving media as a non-viable zone. I didn't tell Jess this directly. She found it on the laptop one afternoon when Eli left it unlocked. She said nothing. She just closed the screen and walked to the bunk and lay down, facing the wall. And she stayed there for 6 hours. And when she got up, she looked different. Harder. Lighter in a way that wasn't relief lighter, like something had been amputated and the phantom weight was still registering, but the actual mass was gone. On day 14, Eli convened us at the table, all 5. "Food supply reassessment," he said. "At current rationing, we have approximately 10 weeks remaining. That puts us at," he calculated, "late December. Winter, cold, low agriculture viability." "What are you saying?" my mother asked. "I'm saying we need to make a decision about timeline. We can stay here and consume resources until they're gone, then surface in winter with nothing. Or we can surface earlier within the next 2 weeks while we still have reserves to carry with us, and attempt to establish a sustainable position while weather allows." "Surface into what?" Jess asked. "Into whatever's out there. There's less movement overhead than there was a week ago. The initial burst seems to be thinning either through dispersal or through attrition. The models suggest infected populations migrate toward noise sources over time, leaving rural areas comparatively clear." "Comparatively," I repeated. "I'm not going to tell you it's safe. It's not safe. It will never be safe again. But the question isn't safety, it's viability." I looked around the table. My mother, who'd shrunk in 2 weeks, less food, less space, less light, making her physically smaller. Nadia, who'd maintained her composure like architecture, but whose eyes were developing a flatness that worried me. Jess, who was here in body and increasingly elsewhere in spirit. Eli, who was burning himself down to maintain a system designed for emergency, not life. And me. Who was I? I'd learned the systems. I'd started doing maintenance. I'd become something between passenger and crew. But I was still underground, still inside his structure, still defined by what he built around me. "I want to go up," I said. Eli looked at me, not surprised, maybe relieved. "We should all go up," Nadia said. "Together," my mother added. The word carried weight she didn't explain. Together, not sent up by Eli, not according to his schedule, not by his permission. He heard it. I saw him here at the small recalibration, the understanding that we were no longer asking. "Okay," he said, quietly. "Together." We surfaced on day 16 at dawn. Eli went first. That was the compromise. His training, his weapon, his point position. But the rest of us followed within 60 seconds, not 30 minutes. Not waiting for permission that was no longer his to withhold. The morning air hit me like a drug. Cold, damp, tinged with smoke from somewhere distant, but open. Infinite. After 16 days of recycled air and concrete walls, the sky looked impossibly vast. I stood on the garage floor and just breathed. And my lungs felt like they were expanding for the first time. Eli's house was damaged, but standing. The back door was gone and torn off its hinges. The kitchen had been ransacked by something without purpose. Drawers open, contents scattered. A mirror in the hallway was shattered. Blood on the living room carpet, dried black. But the structure was intact. The yard was empty. The tree line beyond was still. The morning was quiet in a way that mornings had never been quiet before. No traffic hum, no distant aircraft, no mechanical underlayer. Just birds, wind, the sound of 5 people breathing too loudly. Eli moved through the house room by room. Clear, clear, clear. We followed, staying close. And when we reached the front porch and looked out at the road, I saw the world for the first time since it had ended. 3 cars on Route 360, all stopped, doors open, empty. The Peterson house across the way had burned just the roof, half collapsed. Beyond it, the tree line. The road stretching in both directions, cracked and littered with debris that didn't make sense: a suitcase, a child's bicycle, a single shoe. And in the distance, maybe 300 yards down the road, a figure, standing still, facing away from us, just existing in the middle of the asphalt like a broken compass needle. "Don't engage," Eli murmured. "They respond to sound and proximity. At this distance, we're irrelevant." The figure didn't move. We watched it for a full minute. Then we went back inside. We spent that day assessing. Eli's property had advantages. The tree line provided cover and a potential fuel source. There was a well on the property, hand pump accessible, that he'd tested before the outbreak. The garage, with the bunker beneath, could serve as a fallback position. The house itself was defensible with modification windows boarded, entry points reduced. But the real change wasn't tactical. It was the way we moved through it. Nadia measured rooms, calculated space. My mother assessed the kitchen, the pantry, what could be salvaged from neighbors' abandoned properties. Jess, quiet, hardened. Jess walked the perimeter of the yard with a focus I hadn't seen from her in weeks. She was mapping, identifying. And Eli was taking direction, not giving it. "The south-facing windows need to go," Jess said. "Too exposed. We bored them and cut murder holes." Eli nodded. "Murder holes. Good." "The well needs a shelter built over it," Nadia added. "We're exposed during water collection. A simple lean-to with sight lines." "Agreed," Eli said. Just that. Agreed. Not "I've already planned for that" or "the protocol suggests." Just agreement. Deference. A deliberate stepping back that cost him something I could see, but he'd never name. That afternoon, I found him alone in the garage, sitting on a crate near the open hatch. The bunker below was still lit, still humming. He was staring down into it with an expression I couldn't immediately identify. "You okay?" I asked. He didn't answer for a while. Then, "I spent 3 years building that. Every weekend, every spare dollar, every thought I had went into making sure it would keep you alive." It did keep us alive. You know? He looked up at me. But that was the only thing I knew how to do. And now we're up here, and you don't need a box anymore. You need... He gestured vaguely at the house, the yard, the sky. This. Things I don't know how to build. I sat down beside him. The concrete was cold through my jeans. "You know how to fortify structures," I said. "You know radio systems. You know water purification and food storage and first aid and... I know how to keep people alive. I don't know how to let them live." He said it simply, without self-pity. A diagnosis, clinical. But underneath it, I heard the thing he'd never say directly. "I don't know who I am if I'm not in charge." "So learn," I said, "the way I learned your systems. Let us teach you." He looked at me, and for the first time in our adult lives, maybe the first time ever, I saw him not as the older brother, the protector, the architect of my survival. I saw him as a person. Tired, uncertain, brilliant in one direction, and lost in every other. someone who'd spent 3 years alone, underground in spirit, before putting us underground in body. Okay, he said. That single word, more surrender than anything he'd ever done. We closed the hatch that evening. Not permanently, it remained our fallback, our emergency reserve, our insurance. But we slept in the house that night. All 5 of us, in the living room, on mattresses dragged from the bedroom. Windows boarded, doors barricaded. Eli's handgun on the floor beside him. My hand on the crowbar he'd given, not lent. The sounds outside were few and far. The night was long and dark in a way it never was before electricity. But the air was real. The space was ours, not his alone, but ours. We built something in the weeks that followed. Not safety was gone. But something like partnership, something like shared weight. Eli still knew more than any of us. He still saw patterns, predicted movements, planned contingencies. But he brought them to the table now, literal table, around which all 5 of us sat each morning and presented them as proposals, not directives. He asked questions. He waited for answers. He deferred when someone else's instinct was sharper than his analysis. He was clumsy. He was bad at it. Some mornings I could see him physically bite back the command he wanted to give, swallowing it like medicine. Some nights he disappeared into the operations room, still accessible through the garage hatch. And I knew he was running his models, checking his frequencies, feeding the part of him that needed to control the uncontrollable. I let him have that. We all did. I don't know if Jess's parents survived. She doesn't talk about it. She works the perimeter, reinforces the fence line we built from salvaged lumber. And at night, she lies beside me and breathes in a rhythm that isn't sleep, but isn't anguish either. Something between, something new. What I carry from those 16 days underground isn't gratitude. It isn't resentment. It's something I don't have a word for the specific discomfort of knowing that someone loved you so much they built a cage to keep you breathing. And that the cage worked. And that you can never fully separate the salvation from the suffocation. That you owe your life to someone whose love looks, in certain light, indistinguishable from ownership. I love my brother. I'm alive because of my brother. And I will spend whatever time I have left learning how to make those 2 truths exist without the third one. The quiet, persistent, unshakable sense that I am still, in some way I cannot name, underground.